Hello, my name is Crystal, and this is my older adult presentation, and it focuses on the sixth stage of Erikson's biopsychosocial development. After completing the interview, I decided to focus on stage 6, intimacy versus isolation, because this was a time in my interviewee's life that was filled with a lot of challenges and accomplishments. Intimacy versus isolation is Erikson's sixth stage of development and is considered to be young adulthood. Peck lists this stage as being from the age of 19 until around 40 years old. It is in this stage where the young adult forms close, lasting relationships, whether it is an intimate relationship or just with close friends. These relationships have to be built while maintaining their own sense of self-identity. Young adults must also learn how to develop deep commitments, not only with their family, but with the new relationships they are forming in this stage. McKinnon states that intimacy represents the quality of interactions and the feelings of closeness, both of which are necessary components for successful relationships. The previous stage of identity versus role confusion must have been navigated successfully in order for the individual to now move forward and focus on intimacy without losing their newly formed sense of self-identity. According to McKinnon, the earlier these close relationships are formed, the more generative the individual will be throughout adulthood. My interviewee had several important experiences that impacted his life in this stage of development. But throughout the interview, whether discussing challenges or achievements, he was always positive and optimistic about the experiences. He graduated from high school in 1966 and joined the Navy the following year. While in the Navy, his parents divorced and both later remarried. He was then deployed to Vietnam until he separated from the military. He got married in 1974, and a few months later, his first child was born. 2.5 years later, his second child was born, and shortly after that, he joined the fire department. Within months of joining the fire department, he then decided to start college. This slide will cover his challenges and achievements during this developmental stage. I'm starting this stage with acknowledging the fact that at the end of his adolescence, he graduated from high school. This is a huge accomplishment for him since he was the only one out of the 7 children in his family to actually graduate, and it started his young adulthood stage out focusing on intimacy and not isolation. After graduation, he worked as a helper for a flooring company until December of 1967, when he decided to join the Navy. The decision to join the Navy was made to not only avoid being drafted into the Army or Marines, but to be able to follow in his father's and grandfather's footsteps. While he was stationed in the Philippines, his parents divorced, and his mother and younger siblings who were still living at home moved in with his aunt until his mother remarried. He stated that the divorce didn't affect him too much since he was older and no longer living at home with them. In 1970, he received 30 days leave to come home before he was deployed to a ship in Vietnam. While home on leave, his future wife saw him in his uniform, which made a lasting impression on her. He was then deployed to Vietnam until May of 1971 and stated that he enjoyed being in the Navy and that he had made good friends. When I asked him about his friends, his response was, "I talked to my friends about being away from home and family and wives and girlfriends. We also talked about some of the bad things that had happened and what might happen in the days to come. I think it really helped to talk about it." Though Though he had these close friends, they all went their separate ways after the war, and he did not keep in touch with them. Once he separated from the Navy, he stated, "I didn't really have any career ideas, but I wanted to get a job, save some money, hopefully get married, and start a family." He then decided to start working for another flooring company and became great friends with the owner's son, Ronnie, who was also working there at the time. Over a year later, in September of 1972, he had his first date with his future wife. Though they planned to get married and start a family in the future, she became pregnant at 17 while still in high school. The unexpected pregnancy sped things up, and they got married in 1974. His family had always been in a lower socioeconomic class, while hers was considered to be living in poverty, which did not allow their families to help them much. So he continued to work at the flooring company until the owner decided to sell it, and he was then not sure what would happen with his position. His two best friends from childhood, Robert and Mark, had joined the San Antonio Fire Department several years earlier and had been trying to convince him to join as well. With the uncertainty of his job, he decided to go ahead and take the entrance exam, which he passed. With a smile, he stated, "All three of us from school joined the fire department." He started the fire academy in 1977, a few months after the birth of his second child. The fire department, at the time, required everyone to live within the city limits, which forced him to relocate his family to a new town. He moved into a house that was next door to the parents of his friend Ronnie. A little while later, they moved into the same neighborhood as Ronnie to be even closer to his friend. Shortly after starting the fire department, Robert and Mark convinced him to use his GI Bill to complete his fire science degree so that he could receive an increase in pay. Though college had never been planned, it was a great opportunity that serving in the military had provided for him. It took him 4 years to complete his associate's degree because he could only attend classes on his days off or by getting other guys to cover his shifts, which he would later have to pay back. Working and going to college kept him away from his home a lot, but the extra money from earning his degree led to him being able to buy his first home on a much better side of town. This developmental stage is where individuals are looking for intimacy within their relationships. They must learn to give and take while not losing their sense of self. Cherry states how deep commitment to others is also forged in this stage, as the individual starts to explore relationships outside of their family. Peck explains that if the individual is not able to form intimacy within relationships, then isolation and loneliness will develop. Isolation can often then lead to depression and other mental illnesses. Malone describes how not negotiating the stage successfully can hinder emotional well-being, whilst Fatina points out that a crisis should not be avoided, that it needs to be resolved successfully at each developmental stage for an individual to move on and become resilient throughout their life. The biopsychosocial factors or events that may have facilitated the resolution of the psychosocial crisis are the interviewee's race, gender, education, and community. He stated that he was not affected by racism since he was white and grew up in a community of similar ethnicity and social class. He also feels that without the draft and having to join the military, he never would have completed college and earned a degree. Oppression shaped my interviewee's life in that he grew up in a lower class, which forced him to share a small house with his large family. He stated that he thought having so many siblings was normal and that he didn't mind having a large family. Due to his socioeconomic class, he also had to start working in middle school and learned very young to work hard, not to take anything for granted, and to appreciate things more. He stated that he had to work for everything, so he wasn't afraid of hard work. Rogers states that Urie Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory explains human development by describing aspects of the individual, the environment, and the interaction between the two. This theory organizes the environment into 4 different levels: the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. The microsystem is made up of all the relationships the individual has in the immediate environment. For my interviewee, this includes his home, the Navy, the fire department, his neighborhood, his college, and his children's elementary school. The next level is the mesosystem, which is where 2 or more microsystems within the individual's environments interact. This level was the interactions between my interviewee's home and the Navy, between his home and the fire department, and between his home and his college. The next level is the exosystem, which is made up of all the social settings where people are affected by the things that happen there. This included the military, the fire station, his community college classes, local businesses, and the community itself. The last level is the macro system, which is all the larger levels consisting of cultural factors that affect an individual's environment. Applying a multi-systems lens to my interviewee's life shows he had several opportunities arise from the military and the fire department that he took full advantage of. At the same time, though, these opportunities took him away from his family more than he would have liked. An additional theory to examine is social learning theory, which suggests that people learn through social interactions and cognition by modeling and having self-efficacy. Rogers explains modeling as watching how others do things and then imitating those behaviors. My interviewee did this by modeling his father's work ethic to always provide for his family. Self-efficacy is explained by Rogers as people's expectations that they can perform a task successfully. My interviewee showed this by graduating from high school and college, becoming a radioman in the Navy, taking an entrance exam for the fire department, and then continuing to advance in that career. Erikson's theory of psychosocial development did have limitations, though. One limitation Rogers points out is that individuals develop at different rates, and trying to put them into a stage based on age does not always work. It is also hard to define the crisis listed at each stage, and is then left up to interpretation by clinicians. Erikson also did not take into account different cultural groups and their timing for developmental stages, which could be different from the ones he actually studied. Here are my references used for this presentation. And thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.